Chapter 1 of The Heritage of the Desert by Zane Grey. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Richard Kilmer. Chapter 1 The Heritage of the Desert by Zane Grey. The Sign of the Sunset. But the man's almost dead. The words stung John Hare's fainting spirit into life. He opened his eyes. The desert still stretched before him, the appalling thing that had overpowered him with its deceiving purple distance. Near by stood a somber group of men. "Leave him here," said one, addressing a gray-bearded giant. "He's the fellow sent into southern Utah to spy out the cattle thieves. He's all but dead. Dene's outlaws are after him. Don't cross Dene." The stately answer might have come from a Scottish Covenanter or a follower of Cromwell. "Martin Cole, I will not go a hair's breadth out of my way for Dene or any other man. You forget your religion. I see my duty to God." "Yes, August Naab, I know," replied the little man bitterly. "You would cast the Scriptures in my teeth and liken this man to one who went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves. But I've suffered enough at the hands of Dene." The formal speech, the biblical references, recalled to the reviving Hare that he was still in the land of the Mormons. As he lay there, the strange words of the Mormons linked the hard experience of the last few days with the stern reality of the present. "Martin Cole, I hold to the spirits of our fathers," replied Naab, like one reading from the Old Testament. "They came into this desert land to worship and multiply in peace. They conquered the desert. They prospered with the years that brought settlers, cattlemen, sheep herders, all hostile to their religion and their livelihood. Nor did they ever fail to succor the sick and unfortunate. What are our toils and perils compared to theirs? Why should we forsake the path of duty and turn from mercy because of a cutthroat outlaw? I like not the sign of the times, but I am a Mormon. I trust in God." "August Naab, I am a Mormon too," returned Cole, "but my hands are stained with blood. Soon yours will be if you keep your water holes and your cattle. Yes, I know. You're strong, stronger than any of us, far off in your desert oasis, hemmed in by walls, cut off by canyons, guarded by your Navajo friends. But Holderness is creeping slowly on you. He'll ignore your water rights and drive your stock. Soon Dene will steal cattle under your very eyes. Don't make them enemies." "I can't pass by this helpless man," rolled out August Naab's sonorous voice. Suddenly, with livid face and shaking hand, Cole pointed westward. "There! Dene and his band. See? Under the red wall. See the dust not 10 miles away. See them?" The desert, gray in the foreground, purple in the distance, sloped to the west. Eyes keen as those of hawks searched the waste and followed the red mountain rampart which, sheer in bold height and processional in its craggy sweep, shut out the north. Far away little puffs of dust rose above the white sage, and creeping specks moved at a snail's pace. "See them? Ah, then look, August Naab. Look in the heavens above for my prophecy," cried Cole fanatically. "The red sunset, the sign of the times, blood." A broad bar of dense black shut out the April sky, except in the extreme west, where a strip of pale blue formed background for several clouds of striking color and shape. They alone in all that expanse were dyed in the desert's sunset crimson. The largest projected from behind the dark cloud bank in the shape of a huge fist, and the others, small and round, floated below. To Cole it seemed a giant hand clutching with inexorable strength a bleeding heart. His terror spread to his companions as they stared. Then as light surrendered to shade, the sinister color faded, The tracing of the closed hand softened, flush and glow paled, leaving the sky purple, as if mirroring the desert floor. One golden shaft shot up, to be blotted out by sudden darkening change, and the sun had set. "That may be God's will," said August Naab. "So be it. Martin Cole, take your men and go." There was a word, half oath, half prayer, and then rattle of stirrups, the creak of saddles, clink of spurs, followed by the driving rush of fiery horses. Cole and his men disappeared in a pall of yellow dust. A wan smile lightened John Hare's face as he spoke weakly. "I fear your generous act can't save me, may bring you harm. I'd rather you left me, seeing you have women in your party." "Don't try to talk yet," said August Naab. "You're faint. Here, drink." He stooped to Hare, who was leaning against a sage bush, and he held a flask to his lips. Rising, he called to his men, "Make camp, sons. We've an hour before the outlaws come up, and if they don't go round the sand dune we'll have longer." Hare's flagging senses rallied, and he forgot himself in wonder. While the bustle went on, unhitching of wagon teams, hobbling and feeding of horses, unpacking of camp supplies, Naab appeared to be lost in deep meditation or prayer. Not once did he glance backward over the trail on which peril was fast approaching. His gaze was fastened on a ridge to the east, where desert line, fringed by stunted cedars, met the pale blue sky, and for a long time he neither spoke nor stirred. At length he turned to the camp fire. He raked out red coals and placed the iron pots in position, by way of assistance to the women who were preparing the evening meal. A cool wind blew in from the desert, rustling the sage, sifting the sand, fanning the dull coals to burning opals. Twilight failed and night fell. One by one great stars shone out, cold and bright. From the zone of blackness surrounding the camp burst the short bark, the hungry whine, the long drawn-out wail of desert wolves. "Supper, sons," called Naab, as he replenished the fire with an armful of greasewood. Naab's sons had his stature, though not his bulk. They were wiry, rangy men, young and somehow old. The desert had multiplied their years. Hare could not have told one face from another, the bronze skin and steel eye and hard line of each were so alike. The women, one of middle aged, the others young, were of comely, serious aspect. "Mescal," called the Mormon. A slender girl slipped from one of the covered wagons. She was dark, supple, straight as an Indian. August Naab dropped to his knees, and as the members of his family bowed their heads, he extended his hands over them and over the food laid on the ground. "Lord, we kneel in humble thanksgiving. Bless this food to our use. Strengthen us, guide us, keep us as thou hast in the past. Bless this stranger within our gates. Help us to help him. Teach us thy ways, O Lord. Amen." Hare found himself flushing and thrilling, found himself unable to control a painful binding in his throat. In 48 hours he had learned to hate the Mormons unutterably. Here, in the presence of this austere man, he felt that hatred wrenched from his heart, and in its place stirred something warm and living. He was glad, for if he had to die as he believed, either from the deed of evil men or from this last struggle of his wasted body, he did not want to die in bitterness. That simple prayer recalled the home he had long since left in Connecticut, and the time when he used to tease his sisters and anger his father and hurt his mother while grace was being said at the breakfast table. Now he was alone in the world, sick and dependent upon the kindness of these strangers. But they were really friends. It was a wonderful thought. "Mescal, wait on the stranger," said August Naab, and the girl knelt beside him, tendering meat and drink. His nerveless fingers refused to hold the cup, and she put it to his lips while he drank. Hot coffee revived him. He ate and grew stronger, and readily began to talk when the Mormon asked for his story. "There isn't much to tell. My name is Hare. I am 24. My parents are dead. I came West because the doctor said I couldn't live in the East. At first I got better, but my money gave out, and work became a necessity. I tramped from place to place, ending up ill in Salt Lake City. People were kind to me there. Some one got me a job with a big cattle company and sent me to Marysvale, southward over the bleak plains. It was cold. I was ill when I reached Lund. Before I even knew what my duties were, for at Lund I was to begin work, men called me a spy. A fellow named Chance threatened me. An innkeeper led me out the back way, gave me bread and water, and said, 'Take this road to Bane. It's 16 miles. If you make it, some one will give you a lift north.' I walked all night and all the next day. Then I wandered on till I dropped here where you found me." "You missed the road to Bane," said Naab. "This is the trail to White Sage. It's a trail of sand and stone that leaves no tracks. A lucky thing for you. Dene wasn't in Lund while you were there, else you wouldn't be here. He hasn't seen you, and he can't be certain of your trail. Maybe he rode to Bane, but still we may find a way." One of his sons whistled low, causing Naab to rise slowly, to peer into the darkness, to listen intently. "Here, get up," he said, extending a hand to Hare. "Pretty shaky, huh? Can you walk? Give me a hold there. Mescal, come." The slender girl obeyed, gliding noiselessly like a shadow. "Take his arm." Between them they led Hare to a jumble of stones on the outer edge of the circle of light. "It wouldn't do to hide," continued Naab, lowering his voice to a swift whisper. "That might be fatal. You're in sight of the camp fire, but indistinct. By and by the outlaws will get here, and if any of them prowl around close, you and Mescal must pretend to be sweethearts. Understand? They'll pass by Mormon love making without a second look. Now, lad, courage. Mescal, it may save his life." Naab returned to the fire, his shadow looming in gigantic proportions on the white canopy of a covered wagon. Fitful gusts of wind fretted the blaze. It roared and crackled and sputtered, now illuminating the still forms, then enveloping them in fantastic obscurity. Hare shivered, perhaps from the cold air, perhaps from growing dread. Westward lay the desert, an impenetrable black void. In front, the gloomy mountain wall lifted jagged peaks close to the stars. To the right rose the ridge, the rocks and stunted cedars of its summit standing in weird relief. Suddenly Hare's fugitive glance descried a dark object. He watched intently as it moved and rose from behind the summit of the ridge to make a bold black figure silhouetted against the cold clearness of sky. He saw it distinctly, realized it was close, and breathed hard as the wind-swept mane and tail, the lean, wild shape, and a single plume resolved themselves into the unmistakable outline of an Indian mustang and rider. "Look," he whispered to the girl. "See a mounted Indian there on the ridge. There, he's gone. No, I see him again. But that's another. Look, there are more." He ceased in breathless suspense and stared fearfully at a line of mounted Indians moving in single file over the ridge to become lost to view in the intervening blackness. A faint rattling of gravel and the peculiar crack of unshod hoof on stone gave reality to that shadowy train. "Navajos," said Mescal. "Navajos," he echoed. "I heard of them at Lund. Desert Hawks, the men called them, worse than Piutes. Must we not alarm the men? You aren't you afraid?" "No." "But they are hostile." "Not to him." She pointed at the stalwart figure standing against the firelight. "Ah, I remember. The man Cole spoke of friendly Navajos. They must be close by. What does it mean?" "I'm not sure. I think they are out there in the cedars, waiting." "Waiting? For what?" "Perhaps for a signal." "They were expected?" "I don't know. I only guess. We used to ride often to White Sage and Lund. Now we go seldom, and when we do there seems to be Navajos near the camp at night, and riding the ridges by day. I believe Father Naab knows." "Your father's risking much for me. He's good. I wish I could show my gratitude." "I call him Father Naab, but he is not my father." "A niece or granddaughter, then?" "I'm no relation. Father Naab raised me in his family. My mother was a Navajo, my father a Spaniard." "Why!" exclaimed Hare. "When you came out of the wagon I took you for an Indian girl. But the moment you spoke you talk so well no one would dream." "Mormons are well educated and teach the children they raise," she said, as he paused in embarrassment. He wanted to ask if she were a Mormon by religion, but the question seemed curious and unnecessary. His interest was aroused. He realized suddenly that he had found pleasure in her low voice. It was new and strange, unlike any woman's voice he had ever heard, and he regarded her closely. He had only time for a glance at her straight, clean-cut profile when she turned startled eyes on him, eyes black as the night, and they were eyes that looked through and beyond him. She held up a hand, slowly bent toward the wind, and whispered, "Listen." Hare heard nothing save the barking of coyotes and the breeze in the sage. He saw, however, the men rise from around the camp fire to face the north, and the women climb into the wagon and close the canvas flaps. And he prepared himself, with what fortitude he could command, for the approach of the outlaws. He waited, straining to catch a sound. His heart throbbed audibly like a muffled drum, and for an endless moment his ears seemed deadened to aught else. Then a strong puff of wind whipped in, banging the rhythmic beat of flying hoofs. Suspense ended. Hare felt the easing of a weight upon him. Whatever was to be his fate, it would be soon decided. The sound grew into a clattering roar. A black mass hurled itself over the border of opaque circle, plunged into the light, and halted. August Naab deliberately threw a bundle of greasewood upon the camp fire. A blaze leaped up, sending abroad a red flare. "Who comes?" he called. "Friends, Mormon, friends," was the answer. "Get down, friends, and come to the fire." 3 horsemen advanced to the foreground. Others, a troop of 8 or 10, remained in the shadow, a silent group. Hare sank back against the stone. He knew the foremost of those horsemen, though he had never seen him. "Dene," whispered Mescal, and confirmed his instinct of fear. Hare was nervously alive to the handsome presence of the outlaw. Glimpses that he had caught of bad men returned vividly as he noticed the clean-shaven face, the youthful, supple body, the cool, careless mien. Dene's eyes glittered as he pulled off his gauntlets and beat the sand out of them. But for that quick, fierce glance, his leisurely, friendly manner would have disarmed suspicion. "Are you the Mormon Naab?" he queried. "August Naab, I am." "Dry camp, huh? Horses tired, I reckon. Sure is a sandy trail. Where's the rest of your fellows?" "Cole and his men were in a hurry to make White Sage to night. They were traveling light. I've heavy wagons." "Naab, I reckon you shore wouldn't tell a lie." "I have never lied." "Heard of a young fellow that was in Lund. Pale chap. Lunger, we'd call him back West." "I heard that he had been mistaken for a spy at Lund and had fled toward Bane." "Hadn't seen nothing of him this side of Lund?" "No." "Seen any Navvies?" "Yes." The outlaw stared hard at him. Apparently he was about to speak of the Navajos, for his quick uplift of head at Naab's blunt affirmative suggested the impulse, but he checked himself and slowly drew on his gloves. "Naab, I'm shore comin' to visit you some day. Never been over that range. Heard you had fine water, fine cattle. An' say, I seen that little Navajo girl you have, an' I wouldn't mind seein' her again." August Naab kicked the fire into brighter blaze. "Yes, fine range," he presently replied, his gaze fixed on Dene. "Fine water, fine cattle, fine browse. I've a fine graveyard, too. 30 graves, an' not one a woman's. Fine place for graves, that canyon country. You don't have to dig. There's one grave that Indians have never named. It's 3,000 feet deep." "That must be in hell," replied Dene, with a smile, ignoring the covert meaning. He leisurely surveyed Naab's 4 sons, the wagons and horses, till his eyes fell upon Hare and Mescal. With that he swung in his saddle as if to dismount. "I shore want to look around." Get down," returned the Mormon. The deep voice, unwelcoming, vibrant with an odd ring, would have struck a less suspicious man than Dene. The outlaw wrung his leg back over the pommel, sagged in the saddle, and appeared to be pondering the question. Plainly he was uncertain of his ground. But his indecision was brief. "Two Spot, you look 'em over," he ordered. The third horseman dismounted and went toward the wagons. Hare, watching this scene, became conscious that his fear had intensified with the recognition of Two Spot as Chance, the outlaw whom he would not soon forget. In his excitement he moved against Mescal and felt her trembling violently. "Are you afraid?" he whispered. "Yes, of Dene." The outlaw rummaged in one of the wagons, pulled aside the canvas flaps of the other, laughed harshly, and then with clinking spurs tramped through the camp, kicking the beds, overturning a pile of saddles, and making disorder generally, till he spied the couple sitting on the stone in the shadow. As the outlaw lurched that way, Hare, with a start of recollection, took Mescal in his arms and leaned his head against hers. He felt one of her hands lightly brush his shoulder and rest there, trembling. Shuffling footsteps scraped the sand, sounded nearer and nearer, slowed and paused. "Sparkin'! Dead to the world! Ha ha!" The coarse laugh gave place to moving footsteps. The rattling clink of stirrup and spur mingled with the restless stamp of horses. Chance had mounted. Dene's voice drawled out, "Good bye, Naab. I shore will see you all some day." The heavy thuds of many hoofs evened into a roar that diminished as it rushed away. In unutterable relief Hare realized his deliverance. He tried to rise, but power of movement had gone from him. He was fainting, yet his sensations were singularly acute. Mescal's hand dropped from his shoulder. Her cheek, that had been cold against his, grew hot. She quivered through all her slender length. Confusion claimed his senses. Gratitude and hope flooded his soul. Something sweet and beautiful, the touch of this desert girl, rioted in his blood. His heart swelled in exquisite agony. Then he was whirling in darkness, and he knew no more. End of chapter 1. The Heritage of the Desert by Zane Grey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. White Sage. The night was as a blank to Hare, the morning like a drifting of hazy clouds before his eyes. He felt himself moving, and when he awakened clearly to consciousness, he lay upon a couch on the vine-covered porch of a cottage. He saw August Naab open a gate to admit Martin Cole. They met as friends. No trace of scorn marred August's greeting, and Martin was not the same man who had shown fear on the desert. His welcome was one of respectful regard for his superior. "Elder, I heard you were safe in," he said, fervently. "We feared I know not what. I was distressed till I got the news of your arrival. How's the young man?" "He's very ill. But while there's life there's hope." "Will the Bishop administer to him?" "Gladly, if the young man's willing. Come, let's go in." "Wait, August," said Cole. "Did you know your son Snap was in the village?" "My son here?" August Naab betrayed anxiety. "I left him home with work. He shouldn't have come. Is he?" "He's drinking and in an ugly mood. It seems he traded horses with Jeff Larsen and got the worst of the deal. There's pretty sure to be a fight." "He always hated Larsen." "Small wonder. Larsen is mean. He's as bad as we got, and that's saying a good deal. Snap has done worse things than fight with Larsen. He's doing a worse thing now, August. He's too friendly with Dene." "I've heard it before. But, Martin, what can I do?" "Do? God knows. What can any of us do? Times have changed, August. Dene is here in White Sage, free, welcome in many homes. Some of our neighbors, perhaps men we trust, are secret members of this rustlers' band." "You're right, Cole. There are Mormons who are cattle thieves. To my eternal shame I confess it. Under cover of night they ride with Dene, and here in our midst they meet him in easy tolerance. Driven from Montana, he comes here to corrupt our young men. God's mercy!" "August, some of our young men need no one to corrupt them. Dene has no great task to win them. He rode in here with a few outlaws, and now he has a strong band. We've got to face it. We haven't any law, but he can be killed. Some one must kill him. Yet, bad as Dene is, he doesn't threaten our living as Holderness does. Dene steals a few cattle, kills a man here and there. Holderness reaches out and takes our springs. Because we've no law to stop him, he steals the blood of our life. Water, God's gift to the desert. Some one must kill Holderness, too." "Martin, this lust to kill is a fearful thing. Come in. You must pray with the Bishop." "No, it's not prayer I need, Elder," replied Cole, stubbornly. "I'm still a good Mormon. What I want is the stock I've lost, and my fields green again." August Naab had no answer for his friend. A very old man with snow white hair and beard came out on the porch. "Bishop, Brother Martin is railing again," said Naab, as Cole bared his head. "Martin, my son, unbosom thyself," rejoined the Bishop. "Black doubt and no light," said Cole, despondently. "I'm of the younger generation of Mormons, and faith is harder for me. I see signs you can't see. I've had trials hard to bear. I was rich in cattle, sheep, and water. These Gentiles, this rancher Holderness, and this outlaw Dene have driven my cattle, killed my sheep, piped my water off my fields. I don't like the present. We are no longer in the old days. Our young men are drifting away, and the few who return come with ideas opposed to Mormonism. Our girls and boys are growing up influenced by the Gentiles among us. They intermarry, and that's a death blow to our creed." "Martin, cast out this poison from your heart. Return to your faith. The millennium will come. Christ will reign on earth again. The 10 tribes of Israel will be restored. The Book of Mormon is the word of God, the creed we live. We may suffer here and die, but our spirits will go marching on, and the city of Zion will be builded over our graves." Cole held up his hands in a meekness that signified hope, if not faith. August Naab bent over Hare. "I would like to have the Bishop administer to you," he said. "What's that?" asked Hare. "A Mormon custom, the laying on of hands. We know its efficacy in trouble and illness. A bishop of the Mormon Church has the gift of tongues, of prophecy, of revelation, of healing. Let him administer to you. It entails no obligation. Accept it as a prayer." "I'm willing," replied the young man. Thereupon Naab spoke a few low words to some one through the open door. Voices ceased. Soft footsteps sounded without. Women crossed the threshold, followed by tall young men and rosy-cheeked girls and round-eyed children. A white-haired old woman came forward with solemn dignity. She carried a silver bowl, which she held for the Bishop as he stood close by Hare's couch. The Bishop put his hands into the bowl, anointing them with fragrant oil. Then he placed them on the young man's head and offered up a brief prayer, beautiful in its simplicity and tremulous utterance. The ceremony ended. The onlookers came forward with pleasant words on their lips, pleasant smiles on their faces. The children filed by his couch, bashful yet sympathetic. The women murmured, the young men grasped his hand. Mescal flitted by with downcast eyes, with a shy smile, but no word. "Your fever is gone," said August Naab, with his hand on Hare's cheek. "It comes and goes suddenly," replied Hare. "I feel better now, only I'm oppressed. I can't breathe freely. I want air, and I'm hungry." "Mother Mary, the lad's hungry. Judith, Esther, where are your wits? Help your mother. Mescal, wait on him. See to his comfort." Mescal brought a little table and a pillow, and the other girls soon followed with food and drink. Then they hovered about, absorbed in caring for him. "They said I fell among thieves," mused Hare, when he was once more alone. "I have fallen among saints as well." He felt that he could never repay this August Naab. "If only I might live!" he ejaculated. How restful was this cottage garden! The green sward was a balm to his eyes. Flowers new to him, though with familiar springtime hue, lifted fresh faces everywhere. Fruit trees, with branches intermingling, blended the white and pink of blossoms. There was the soft laughter of children in the garden. Strange birds darted among the trees. Their notes were new, but their song was the old delicious monotone, the joy of living and love of spring. A green bowered irrigation ditch led by the porch, and unseen water flowed gently with gurgle and tinkle, with music in its hurry. Innumerable bees murmured amid the blossoms. Hare fell asleep. Upon returning drowsily to consciousness, he caught through half-open eyes the gleam of level shafts of gold sunlight low down in the trees. Then he felt himself being carried into the house to be laid upon a bed. Some one gently unbuttoned his shirt at the neck, removed his shoes, and covered him with a blanket. Before he had fully awakened he was left alone, and quiet settled over the house. A languorous sense of ease and rest lulled him to sleep again. In another moment, it seemed to him, he was awake. Bright daylight streamed through the window, and a morning breeze stirred the faded curtain. The drag in his breathing, which was always a forerunner of a coughing spell, warned him now. He put on his coat and shoes and went outside, where his cough attacked him, had its sway, and left him. "Good morning," sang out August Naab's cheery voice. "16 hours of sleep, my lad." "I did sleep, didn't I? No wonder I feel well this morning. A peculiarity of my illness is that one day I'm down, the next day up. With the goodness of God, my lad, we'll gradually increase the days up. Go in to breakfast. Afterward I want to talk to you. This'll be a busy day for me, shoeing the horses and packing supplies. I want to start for home to-morrow." Hare pondered over Naab's words while he ate. The suggestion in them, implying a relation to his future, made him wonder if the good Mormon intended to take him to his desert home. He hoped so, and warmed anew to this friend. But he had no enthusiasm for himself. His future seemed hopeless. Naab was waiting for him on the porch, and drew him away from the cottage down the path toward the gate. "I want you to go home with me." "You're kind. I'm only a sort of beggar. I've no strength left to work my way. I'll go, though it's only to die." "I haven't the gift of revelation, yet somehow I see that you won't die of this illness. You'll come home with me. It's a beautiful place, my Navajo oasis. The Indians call it the Garden of Eschtah. If you can get well anywhere, it'll be there." "I'll go, but I ought not. What can I do for you?" "No man can ever tell what he may do for another. The time may come. Well, John, is it settled?" He offered his huge, broad hand. "It's settled. I—" Hare faltered as he put his hand in Naab's. The Mormon's grip straightened his frame and braced him. Strength and simplicity flowed from the giant's toil-hardened palm. Hare swallowed his thanks along with his emotion, and for what he had intended to say he substituted, "No one ever called me John. I don't know the name. Call me Jack." "Very well, Jack. And now let's see. You'll need some things from the store. Can you come with me? It's not far." "Surely. And now what I need most is a razor to scrape the alkali and stubble off my face." The wide street, bordered by cottages peeping out of green and white orchards, stretched in a straight line to the base of the ascent which led up to the Pink Cliffs. A green square enclosed a gray church, a schoolhouse, and public hall. Farther down the main thoroughfare were several weather-boarded, whitewashed stores. Two dusty men were riding along, one on each side of the wildest, most vicious little horse Hare had ever seen. It reared and bucked and kicked, trying to escape from two lassos. In front of the largest store were a number of mustangs, all standing free, with bridles thrown over their heads and trailing on the ground. The loungers, leaning against the railing and about the doors, were lank brown men, very like Naab's sons. Some wore sheepskin chaps, others blue overalls. All wore boots and spurs, wide soft hats, and in their belts, far to the back, hung large Colt revolvers. "We'll buy what you need, just as if you expected to ride the range for me to morrow," said Naab. "The first thing we ask a new man is, can he ride? Next, can he shoot?" "I could ride before I got so weak. I never handled a revolver, but I can shoot a rifle. Never shot at anything except targets, and it seemed to come natural for me to hit them." "Good. We'll show you some targets. Lions, bears, deer, cats, wolves. There's a fine .44 Winchester here that my friend Abe has been trying to sell. It has a long barrel and weighs 8 pounds. Our desert riders like the light carbines that go easy on a saddle. Most of the mustangs aren't weight carriers. This rifle has a great range. I've shot it, and it's just the gun for you to use on wolves and coyotes. You'll need a Colt and a saddle, too. By the way," he went on as they mounted the store steps, "here's the kind of money we use in this country." He handed Hare a slip of blue paper, a written check for a sum of money, signed, but without register of bank or name of firm. "We don't use real money," he added. "There's very little coin or currency in southern Utah. Most of the Gentiles lately come in have money, and some of us Mormons have a bag or two of gold, but scarcely any of it gets into circulation. We use these checks, which go from man to man sometimes for 6 months. The roundup of a check means sheep, cattle, horses, grain, merchandise, or labor. Every man gets his real money's value without paying out an actual cent." "Such a system at least means honest men," said Hare, laughing his surprise. They went into a wide door to tread a maze of narrow aisles between boxes and barrels, stacks of canned vegetables, and piles of harnesses and dry goods. They entered an open space where several men leaned on a counter. "Hello, Abe," said Naab. "Seen anything of Snap?" "Hello, August. Yes, Snap's inside. So's Holderness. Says he rode in off the range on purpose to see you." Abe designated an open doorway from which issued loud voices. Hare glanced into a long, narrow room full of smoke and the fumes of rum. Through the haze he made out a crowd of men at a rude bar. Abe went to the door and called out, "Hey, Snap, your dad wants you. Holderness, here's August Naab." A man staggered up the few steps leading to the store and swayed in. His long face had a hawkish cast, and it was gray, not with age, but with the sage gray of the desert. His eyes were of the same hue, cold, yet burning with little fiery flecks in their depths. He appeared short of stature because of curvature of the spine, but straightened up he would have been tall. He wore a blue flannel shirt and blue overalls. Round his lean hips was a belt holding two Colt's revolvers, their heavy, dark butts projecting outward, and he had on high boots with long, cruel spurs. "Howdy, father," he said. "I'm packing to day," returned August Naab. "We ride out to morrow. I need your help." "All right, when I get my pinto from Larsen." "Never mind Larsen. If he got the better of you, let the matter drop." "Jeff got my pinto for a mustang with 3 legs. If I hadn't been drunk I'd never have traded. So I'm looking for Jeff." He bit out the last words with a peculiar snap of his long teeth, a circumstance which caused Hare instantly to associate the savage clicking with the name he had heard given this man. August Naab looked at him with gloomy eyes and stern, shut mouth, an expression of righteous anger, helplessness, and grief combined. The look of a man to whom obstacles had been nothing, at last confronted with crowning defeat. Hare realized that this son was Naab's firstborn, best loved, a thorn in his side, a black sheep. "Say, father, is that the spy you found on the trail?" Snap's pale eyes gleamed on Hare, and the little flames seemed to darken and leap. "This is John Hare, the young man I found. But he's not a spy." "You can't make any one believe that. He's down as a spy, Dene's spy. His name's gone over the ranges as a counter of unbranded stock. Dene has named him, and Dene has marked him. Don't take him home, as you've taken so many sick and hunted men before. What's the good of it? You never made a Mormon out of one of them yet. Don't take him, unless you want another grave for your cemetery. Ha ha!" Hare recoiled with a shock. Snap Naab swayed to the door, stepped down, all the time with his face over his shoulder, his baleful glance on Hare. Then the blue haze swallowed him. The several loungers went out. August engaged the storekeeper in conversation, introducing Hare and explaining their wants. They inspected the various needs of a range rider, selecting in the end not the few suggested by Hare, but the many chosen by Naab. The last purchase was the rifle Naab had talked about. It was a beautiful weapon, finely polished and carved, entirely out of place among the plain, coarse-sighted and coarse-stocked guns in the rack. "Never had a chance to sell it," said Abe. "Too long and heavy for the riders. I'll let it go cheap, half price, and the cartridges also, 2,000." "Taken," replied Naab, quickly, with a satisfaction which showed he liked a bargain. "August, you must be going to shoot some?" queried Abe. "Something bigger than rabbits and coyotes. It's about time, even if you are an elder. We Mormons must—" He broke off, continuing in a low tone, "Here's Holderness now." Hare wheeled with interest that had gathered with the reiteration of this man's name. A newcomer stooped to get in the door. He outtopped even Naab in height, and was a superb blond-bearded man, striding with the spring of a mountaineer. "Good day to you, Naab," he said. "Is this the young fellow you picked up?" "Yes, Jack Hare," rejoined Naab. "Well, Hare, I'm Holderness. You'll recall my name. You were sent to Lund by men interested in my ranges. I expected to see you in Lund, but couldn't get over." Hare met the proffered hand with his own, and as he had recoiled from Snap Naab, so now he received another shock, different indeed, but impelling in its power, instinctive of some great portent. Hare was impressed by the indefinable subtlety, a nameless distrust, as colorless as the clear penetrating amber lightness of the eyes that bent upon him. "Holderness, will you write the story about Hare?" inquired Naab. "You mean about his being a spy? Well, Naab, the truth is that was his job. I advised against sending a man down here for that sort of work. It won't do. These Mormons will steal each other's cattle, and they've got to get rid of them, so they won't have a man taking account of stock, brands, and all that. If the Mormons would stand for it, the rustlers wouldn't. I'll take Hare out to the ranch and give him work if he wants, but he'd do best to leave Utah." "Thank you, no," replied Hare decidedly. "He's going with me," said August Naab. Holderness accepted this with an almost imperceptible nod, and he swept Hare with eyes that searched and probed for latent possibilities. It was the keen intelligence of a man who knew what development meant on the desert, not in any sense an interest in the young man at present. Then he turned his back. Hare, feeling that Holderness wished to talk with Naab, walked to the counter and began assorting his purchases, but he could not help hearing what was said. "Lungs bad?" queried Holderness. "One of them," replied Naab. "He's all in. Better send him out of the country. He's got the name of Dene's spy, and he'll never get another on this desert. Dene will kill him. This isn't good judgment, Naab, to take him with you. Even your friends don't like it, and it means trouble for you." "We've settled it," said Naab, coldly. "Well, remember I warned you. I've tried to be friendly with you, Naab, but you won't have it. Anyway, I wanted to see you lately to find out how we stand." "What do you mean?" "How we stand on several things. To begin with, their Mescal. You asked me several times for Mescal, and I said no." "But I never said I'd marry her. Now I want her, and I will marry her." "No," rejoined Naab, adding brevity to his coldness. "Why not?" demanded Holderness. "Oh, well, I can't take that as an insult. I know there's not enough money in Utah to get a girl away from a Mormon. About the offer for the water rights, how do we stand? I'll give you $10,000 for the rights to Seeping Springs and Silver Cup." "10,000!" ejaculated Naab. "Holderness, I wouldn't take 100,000. You might as well ask to buy my home, my stock, my range, 20 years of toil for $10,000. "You refuse? All right. I think I've made you a fair proposition," said Holderness, in a smooth, quick tone. "The land is owned by the government, and though your ranges are across the Arizona line, they really figure as Utah land. My company is spending big money, and the government won't let you have a monopoly. No one man can control the water supply of 100 miles of range. Times are changing. You want to see that. You ought to protect yourself before it's too late." "Holderness, this is a desert. No man save Mormons could ever have made it habitable. The government scarcely knows of its existence. It'll be 50 years before man can come in here and take our water." "Why can't he? The water doesn't belong to any one. Why can't he?" "Because of the unwritten law of the desert. No Mormon would refuse you or your horse a drink, or even a reasonable supply for your stock. But you can't come in here and take our water for your own use, to supplant us, to parch our stock. Why, even an Indian respects desert law." "Bah! I'm not a Mormon or an Indian. I'm a cattleman. It's plain business with me. Once more I make you the offer." Naab scorned to reply. The men faced each other for a silent moment, their glances scintillating. Then Holderness whirled on his heel, jostling into Hare. "Get out of my way," said the rancher, in the disgust of intense irritation. He swung his arm, and his open hand sent Hare reeling against the counter. "Jack," said Naab, breathing hard, "Holderness showed his real self to day. I always knew it, yet I gave him the benefit of the doubt. For him to strike you, I've not the gift of revelation, but I see. Let us go." On his return to the bishop's cottage Naab did not speak once. The transformation which had begun with the appearance of his drunken son had reached a climax of gloomy silence after the clash with Holderness. Naab went directly to the bishop, and presently the quavering voice of the old minister rose in prayer. Hare dropped wearily into the chair on the porch, and presently fell into a doze, from which he was awakened with a start. Naab's sons, with Martin Cole and several other men, were standing in the yard. Naab himself was gently crowding the women into the house. When he got them all inside he closed the door and turned to Cole. "Was it a fair fight?" "Yes, an even break. They met in front of Abe's. I saw the meeting. Neither was surprised. They stood for a moment watching each other. Then they drew. Only Snap was quicker. Larson's gun went off as he fell. That trick you taught Snap saved his life again. Larson was no slouch on the draw." "Where's Snap now?" "Gone after his pinto. He was sober. Said he'd pack at once. Larson's friends are ugly. Snap said to tell you to hurry out of the village with young Hare if you want to take him at all. Dene has ridden in. He swears you won't take Hare away." "We're all packed and ready to hitch up," returned Naab. "We could start at once. Only until dark I'd rather take chances here than out on the trail. Snap said Dene would ride right into the Bishop's after Hare." "No, he wouldn't dare." "Father!" Dave Naab spoke sharply from where he stood high on a grassy bank. "Here's Dene now riding up with Culver and some men I don't know. They're coming in. Dene's jumped the fence. Look out!" A clatter of hoofs and rattling of gravel preceded the appearance of a black horse in the garden path. His rider bent low to dodge the vines of the arbor and reined in before the porch to slip out of the saddle with the agility of an Indian. It was Dene, dark, smiling, nonchalant. "What do you seek in the house of a bishop?" challenged August Naab, planting his broad bulk square before Hare. "Dene's spy." "What do you seek in the house of a bishop?" repeated Naab. "I shore want to see that young fellow you lied to me about," returned Dene, his smile slowly fading. No speech could be a lie to an outlaw. "I want him, you Mormon preacher." "You can't have him." "I'll shore get him." In one great stride Naab confronted and towered over Dene. The rustler's gaze shifted warily from Naab to the quiet Mormons and back again. Then his right hand quivered and shot downward. Naab's act was even quicker. A Colt gleamed and whirled to the grass, and the outlaw cried as his arm cracked in the Mormon's grasp. Dave Naab leaped off the bank directly in front of Dene's approaching companions and faced them, alert and silent, his hand on his hip. August Naab swung the outlaw against the porch post and held him there with brawny arm. "Whelp of an evil breed!" he thundered, shaking his gray head. "Do you think we fear you and your gun sharp tricks? Look! See this!" He released Dene and stepped back with his hand before him. Suddenly it moved. Quicker than sight, and a Colt revolver lay in his outstretched palm. He dropped it back into the holster. "Let that teach you never to draw on me again." He doubled his huge fist and shoved it before Dene's eyes. "One blow would crack your skull like an egg shell. Why don't I deal it? Because, you mindless hell hound, because there's a higher law than man's, God's law. Thou shalt not kill. Understand that if you can. Leave me and mine alone from this day. Now go." He pushed Dene down the path into the arms of his companions. "Out with you," said Dave Naab. "Hurry! Get your horse. Hurry! I'm not so particular about God as Dad is." End of chapter 2. Of the Heritage of the Desert by Zane Grey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. the trail of the red wall. After the departure of Dene and his comrades, Naab decided to leave White Sage at nightfall. Martin Cole and the bishop's sons tried to persuade him to remain, urging that the trouble sure to come could be more safely met in the village. Naab, however, was obdurate, unreasonably so, Cole said, unless there was some good reason why he wished to strike the trail in the night. When twilight closed in, Naab had his teams ready and the women shut in the canvas-covered wagons. Hare was to ride in an open wagon, one that Naab had left at White Sage to be loaded with grain. When it grew so dark that objects were scarcely discernible, a man vaulted the cottage fence. "Dave, where are the boys?" asked Naab. "Not so loud. The boys are coming," replied Dave in a whisper. "Dene is wild. I guess you snapped a bone in his arm. He swears he'll kill us all. But Chance and the rest of the gang won't be in till late. We've time to reach the Coconina Trail if we hustle." "Any news of Snap?" "He rode out before sundown." Three more forms emerged from the gloom. "All right, boys, go ahead. Dave, you lead." Dave and George Naab mounted their mustangs and rode through the gate. The first wagon rolled after them, its white dome gradually dissolving in the darkness. The second one started. Then August Naab stepped to a seat on the third with a low cluck to the team. Hare shut the gate and climbed over the tailboard of the wagon. A slight swish of weeds and grasses brushing the wheels was all the sound made in the cautious advance. A bare field lay to the left. To the right, low roofs and sharp chimneys showed through the trees. Here and there lights twinkled. No one hailed, not a dog barked. Presently the leaders turned into a road where the iron hoofs and wheels cracked and crunched the stones. Hare thought he saw something in the deep shade of a line of poplar trees. He peered closer and made out a motionless horse and rider, just a shade blacker than the deepest gloom. The next instant they vanished, and the rapid clatter of hoofs down the road told Hare his eyes had not deceived him. "Get up," growled Naab to his horses. "Jack, did you see that fellow?" "Yes. What was he doing there?" "Watching the road. He's one of Dene's scouts." "Will Dene?" One of Naab's sons came trotting back. "Think that was Larson's pal. He was laying in wait for Snap." "I thought he was a scout for Dene," replied August. "Maybe he's that, too." "Likely enough. Hurry along and keep the gray team going lively. They've had a week's rest." Hare watched the glimmering lights of the village vanish one by one, like jack-o'-lanterns. The horses kept a steady, even trot on into the huge, windy hall of the desert night. Fleecy clouds veiled the stars, yet transmitted a wan glow. A chill crept over Hare. As he crawled under the blankets Naab had spread for him, his hand came into contact with a polished metal surface, cold as ice. It was his rifle. Naab had placed it under the blankets. Fingering the rifle, Hare found the spring opening on the right side of the breech, and pressing it down, he felt the round head of a cartridge. Naab had loaded the weapon, had placed it where Hare's hand must find it, yet he had not spoken of it. Hare did not stop to reason with his first impulse. Without a word, with silent insistence, disregarding his shattered health, August Naab had given him a man's part to play. The full meaning lifted Hare out of his self-abasement. Once more he felt himself a man. Hare soon yielded to the warmth of the blankets. A drowsiness that he endeavored in vain to throw off smothered his thoughts. Sleep glued his eyelids tight. They opened again some hours later. For a moment he could not realize where he was. Then the whip of the cold wind across his face, the woolly feel and smell of the blankets, and finally the steady trot of horses and the clink of a chain swinging somewhere under him, recalled the actuality of the night ride. He wondered how many miles had been covered, how the drivers knew the direction and kept the horses in the trail, and whether the outlaws were in pursuit. When Naab stopped the team and, climbing down, walked back some rods to listen, Hare felt sure that Dene was coming. He listened too, but the movements of the horses and the rattle of their harnesses were all the sounds he could hear. Naab returned to his seat. The team started, now no longer in a trot, for they were climbing. After that Hare fell into a slumber in which he could hear the slow grating whir of wheels, and when it ceased he awoke to raise himself and turn his ear to the back trail. By and by he discovered that the black night had changed to gray. Dawn was not far distant. He dozed and awakened to clear light. A rose-red horizon lay below and to the eastward. The intervening descent was like a rolling sea with league-long swells. "Glad you slept some," was Naab's greeting. "No sign of Dene yet. If we can get over the divide we're safe. That's Coconina there, Fire Mountain in Navajo meaning. It's a plateau low and narrow at this end, but it runs far to the east and rises 9,000 feet. It forms 100 miles of the north rim of the Grand Canyon. We're across the Arizona line now." Hare followed the sweep of the ridge that rose to the eastward, but to his inexperienced eyes its appearance carried no sense of its noble proportions. "Don't form any ideas of distance and size yet awhile," said Naab, reading Hare's expression. "They'd only have to be made over as soon as you learn what light and air are in this country. It looks only a half a mile to the top of the divide. Well, if we make it by midday we're lucky. There, see a black spot over this way, far under the red wall? Look sharp. Good. That's Holderness's ranch. It's 30 miles from here. 9 Mile Valley heads in there. Once it belonged to Martin Cole. Holderness stole it, and he's begun to range over the divide." The sun rose and warmed the chill air. Hare began to notice the increased height and abundance of the sagebrush, which was darker in color. The first cedar tree, stunted in growth, dead at the top, was the halfway mark up the ascent. So Naab said. It was also the forerunner of other cedars which increased in number toward the summit. At length Hare, tired of looking upward at the creeping white wagons, closed his eyes. The wheels crunched on the stones, the horses heaved and labored. Naab's "Get up" was the only spoken sound. The sun beamed down warm, then hot, and the hours passed. Some unusual noise roused Hare out of his lethargy. The wagon was at a standstill. Naab stood on the seat with outstretched arm. George and Dave were close by their mustangs, and Snap Naab, mounted on a cream-colored pinto, reined him in under August's arm and faced the valley below. "Maybe you'll make them out," said August. "I can't, and I've watched those dust clouds for hours. George can't decide either." Hare, looking at Snap, was attracted by the eyes from which his father and brothers expected so much. If ever a human being had the eyes of a hawk, Snap Naab had them. The little brown flecks danced in clear, pale yellow. Evidently Snap had not located the perplexing dust clouds, for his glance drifted. Suddenly the remarkable vibration of his pupils ceased, and his face grew fixed, steely, certain. "That's a bunch of wild mustangs," he said. Hare gazed till his eyes hurt, but could see neither cloud of dust nor moving objects. No more was said. The sons wheeled their mustangs and rode to the fore. August Naab reseated himself and took up the reins. The ascent proceeded. But it proceeded leisurely, with more frequent rests. At the end of an hour the horses toiled over the last rise to the summit and entered a level forest of cedars. In another hour they were descending gradually. "Here we are at the tanks," said Naab. Hare saw they had come up with the other wagons. George Naab was leading a team down a rocky declivity to a pool of yellow water. The other boys were unharnessing and unsaddling. "About 3," said Naab, looking at the sun. "We're in good time. Jack, get out and stretch yourself. We'll camp here. There's the Coconina Trail, where the Navajos go in after deer." It was not a pretty spot, this little rock strewn glade, where the white hard trail forked with the road. The yellow water with its green scum made Hare sick. The horses drank with loud gulps. Naab and his sons drank of it. The women filled a pail and portioned it out in basins and washed their faces and hands with evident pleasure. Dave Naab whistled as he wielded an axe vigorously on a cedar. It came home to Hare that the tension of the past night and morning had relaxed. Whether to attribute that fact to the distance from White Sage or to the arrival at the water hole he could not determine. But the certainty was shown in August's cheerful talk to the horses as he slipped bags of grain over their noses, and in the subdued laughter of the women. Hare sent up an unspoken thanksgiving that these good Mormons had apparently escaped from the dangers incurred for his sake. He sat with his back to a cedar and watched the kindling of fires, the deft manipulating of biscuit dough in a basin, and the steaming of pots. The generous meal was spread on a canvas cloth, around which men and women sat cross-legged, after the fashion of Indians. Hare found it hard to adapt his long legs to the posture, and he wondered how these men, whose legs were longer than his, could sit so easily. It was the crown of a cheerful dinner after hours of anxiety and abstinence to have Snap Naab speak civilly to him, and to see him bow his head meekly as his father asked the blessing. Snap ate as though he had utterly forgotten that he had recently killed a man. To hear the others talk to him, one would suppose that they had forgotten it also. All had finished eating except Snap and Dave Naab, when one of the mustangs neighed shrilly. Hare would not have noticed it but for looks exchanged among the men. The glances were explained a few minutes later, when a pattering of hoofs came from the cedar forest and a stream of mounted Indians poured into the glade. The ugly glade became a place of color and action. The Navajos rode wiry, wild-looking mustangs and drove ponies and burros carrying packs, most of which consisted of deer hides. Each Indian dismounted and, unstrapping the blanket which had served as a saddle, headed his mustang for the water hole and gave him a slap. Then the hides and packs were slipped from the pack train, and soon the pool became a kicking, splashing melee. Every cedar tree circling the glade and every branch served as a peg for deer meat. Some of it was in the haunch, the bulk in dark, dried strips. The Indians laid their weapons aside. Every sage bush and low stone held a blanket. A few of these blankets were of solid color. Most of them had bars of white and gray and red, the last color predominating. The mustangs and the burros filed out among the cedars, nipping at the sage and the scattered tufts of spare grass. A group of fires, sending up curling columns of blue smoke, surrounded by a circle of lean, half-naked, bronze-skinned Indians cooking and eating, completed a picture which afforded Hare the satisfying fulfillment of boyish dreams. What a contrast to the memory of a camp site on the Connecticut shore, with boy friends telling tales in the glow of the fire and the wash of the waves on the beach. The sun sank low in the west, sending gleams through the gnarled branches of the cedars and turning the green into gold. At precisely the moment of sunset the Mormon women broke into soft song, which had the element of prayer, and the lips of the men moved in silent harmony. Dave Naab, the only one who smoked, removed his pipe for the moment's grace to the dying day. This simple ceremony over, One of the boys put wood on the fire, and Snap took a jews harp out of his pocket and began to extract doleful discords from it, for which George kicked at him in disgust, finally causing him to leave the circle and repair to the cedars, where he twanged with supreme egotism. "Jack," said August Naab, "our friends the Navajo chiefs Scarbreast and Eschtah are coming to visit us. Take no notice of them at first. They've great dignity, and if you entered their hogans they'd sit for some moments before appearing to see you. Scarbreast is a war chief. Eschtah is the wise old chief of all the Navajos of the Painted Desert. It may interest you to know he's Mescal's grandfather. Some day I'll tell you the story." Hare tried very hard to appear unconscious when two tall Indians stalked into the circle of Mormons. He set his eyes on the white heart of the camp fire and waited. For several minutes no one spoke or even moved. The Indians remained standing for a time, then seated themselves. Presently August Naab greeted them in the Navajo language. This was a signal for Hare to use his eyes and ears. Another interval of silence followed before they began to talk. Hare could see only their blanketed shoulders and black heads. "Jack, come round here," said Naab at length. "I've been telling them about you. These Indians do not like whites except my own family. I hope you'll make friends with them." "How do," said the chief, whom Naab had called Eschtah, a stately, keen-eyed warrior, despite his age. The next Navajo greeted him with a guttural word. This was a warrior whose name might well have been Scarface, for the signs of conflict were there. It was a face like a bronze mask, cast in the one expression of untamed desert fierceness. Hare bowed to each, and felt himself searched by burning eyes which were doubtful yet not unfriendly. "Shake," finally said Eschtah, offering his hand. "Ugh!" exclaimed Scarbreast, extending a bare silver braceleted arm. This sign of friendship pleased Naab. He wished to enlist the sympathies of the Navajo chieftains in the young man's behalf. In his ensuing speech, which was plentifully emphasized with gestures, he lapsed often into English, saying "weak," "no strong," when he placed his hand on Hare's legs, and "bad" when he touched the young man's chest, concluding with the words "sick, sick." Scarbreast regarded Hare with great earnestness, and when Naab had finished he said, "Chineago ping," and rubbed his hand over his stomach. "He says you need meat, lots of deer meat," translated Naab. "Sick," repeated Eschtah, whose English was intelligible. He appeared to be casting about in his mind for additional words to express his knowledge of the white man's tongue, and failing, continued in Navajo, "Tohodina, mocha, malocha." Hare was nonplussed at the roar of laughter from the Mormons. August shook like a mountain in an earthquake. "Eschtah says you hurry, get many squaws, many wives." Other Indians, russet-skinned warriors, with black hair held close by bands round their foreheads, joined the circle, and sitting before the fire, clasped their knees and talked. Hare listened a while, and then, being fatigued, he sought the cedar tree where he had left his blankets. The dry mat of needles made an odorous bed. He placed a sack of grain for a pillow, and doubling up one of the blankets to lie upon, he pulled the others over him. Then he watched and listened. The cedar wood burned with clear flame, and occasionally snapped out a red spark. The voices of the Navajos, scarcely audible, sounded toas and tas, syllables he soon learned were characteristic and dominant in low, deep murmurs. It reminded Hare of something that before had been pleasant to his ear. Then it came to mind, a remembrance of Mescal's sweet voice, and that recalled the kinship between her and the Navajo chieftain. He looked about, endeavoring to find her in the ring of light, for he felt in her a fascination akin to the charm of this twilight hour. Dusky forms passed to and fro under the trees. The tinkle of bells on hobbled mustangs rang from the forest. Coyotes had begun their night quest with wild howls. The camp fire burned red, and shadows flickered on the blanketed Indians. The wind now moaned, now lulled in the cedars. Hare lay back in his blankets and saw lustrous stars through the network of branches. With their light in his face and the cool wind waving his hair on his brow, he thought of the strangeness of it all, of its remoteness from anything ever known to him before, of its inexpressible wildness. And a rush of emotion he failed wholly to stifle proved to him that he could have loved this life if he had not of late come to believe that he had not long to live. Still Naab's influence exorcised even that one sad thought, and he flung it from him in resentment. Sleep did not come so readily. He was not very well this night. The flush of fever was on his cheek, and the heat of feverish blood burned in his body. He raised himself, and resolutely seeking for distraction, once more stared at the camp fire. Some time must have passed during his dreaming, for only 3 persons were in sight. Naab's broad back was bowed. Across the fire, in its ruddy flicker, sat Eschtah beside a slight dark figure. At second glance Hare recognized Mescal. Surprise claimed him, not more for her presence there than for the white band binding her smooth black tresses. She had not worn such an ornament before. The slender band lent her the one touch which made her a Navajo. Was it worn in respect to her aged grandfather? What did this mean for a girl reared with Christian teaching? Was it desert blood? Hare had no answer for these questions. They only increased the mystery and romance. He fell asleep with the picture in his mind of Eschtah and Mescal sitting in the glow of the fire, and of August Naab nodding silently. "Jack, Jack, wake up!" The words broke dully into his slumbers. Wearily he opened his eyes. August Naab bent over him, shaking him gently. "Not so well this morning, eh? Here's a cup of coffee. We're all packed and starting. Drink now and climb aboard. We expect to make Seeping Springs to night." Hare rose presently, and laboring into the wagon, lay down on the sacks. He had one of his blind, sickening headaches. The familiar lumbering of the wheels began, and the clanking of the wagon chain. Despite jar and jolt he dozed at times, awakening to the scrape of the wheel on the leathern brake. After a while the rapid descent of the wagon changed to a roll, without the irritating rattle. He saw a narrow valley, on one side the green, slow swelling cedar slope of the mountain, on the other the perpendicular red wall, with its pinnacles like spears against the sky. All day this backward outlook was the same, except that each time he opened aching eyes the valley had lengthened, the red wall and green slope had come closer together in the distance. By and by there came a halt, the din of stamping horses and sharp commands, the bustle and confusion of camp. Naab spoke kindly to him, but he refused any food, lay still, and went to sleep. Daylight brought him the relief of a clear head and cooled blood. The camp had been pitched close under the red wall. A lichen-covered cliff, wet with dripping water, overhung a round pool. A ditch led the water down the ridge to a pond. Cattle stood up to their knees drinking. Others lay on the yellow clay, which was packed as hard as stone. Still others were climbing the ridge and passing down on both sides. "You look as if you enjoyed that water," remarked Naab, when Hare presented himself at the fire. "Well, it's good, only a little salty. Seeping Springs this is, and it's mine. The ridge we call the Saddle. You see it dips between wall and mountain and separates 2 valleys. This valley we go through to day is where my cattle range. At the other end is Silver Cup Spring, also mine. Keep your eyes open now, my lad." How different was the beginning of this day! The sky was as blue as the sea. The valley snuggled deep in the embrace of wall and mountain. Hare took a place on the seat beside Naab and faced the descent. The line of Navajos, a graceful straggling curve of color on the trail, led the way for the white domed wagons. Naab pointed to a little calf lying half hidden under a bunch of sage. "That's what I hate to see. There's a calf just born. Its mother has gone in for water. Wolves and lions range this valley. We lose hundreds of calves that way." As far as Hare could see, red and white and black cattle speckled the valley. "It's not overstocked. This range is the best in Utah," said Naab. "I say Utah, but it's really Arizona. The Grand Canyon seems to us Mormons to mark the line. There's enough browse here to feed 100,000 cattle. But water's the thing. In some seasons the springs go almost dry, though Silver Cup holds her own well enough for my cattle." Hare marked the tufts of grass lying far apart on the yellow earth. Evidently there was sustenance enough in every 2 feet of ground to support only one tuft. "What's that?" he asked, noting a rolling cloud of dust with black bobbing borders. "Wild mustangs," replied Naab. "There are perhaps 5,000 on the mountain, and they are getting to be a nuisance. They're almost as bad as sheep on the browse, and I should tell you that if sheep pass over a range once the cattle will starve. The mustangs are getting too plentiful. There are also several bands of wild horses." "What's the difference between wild horses and mustangs?" "I haven't figured that out yet. Some say the Spaniards left horses in here 300 years ago. Wild? They are wilder than any naturally wild animal that ever ran on 4 legs. Wait till you get a look at Silvermane or Whitefoot." "What are they?" "Wild stallions. Silvermane is an iron gray with a silver mane, the most beautiful horse I ever saw. Whitefoot's an old black shaggy demon with 1 white foot. Both stallions ought to be killed. They fight my horses and lead off the mares. I had a chance to shoot Silvermane on my way over this trip, but he looked so splendid that I just laid down my rifle." "Can they run?" asked Hare eagerly, with the eyes of a man who loved a horse. "Run? Whew! Just you wait till you see Silvermane cover ground. He can look over his shoulder at you and beat any horse in this country. The Navajos have given up catching him as a bad job. Why, here, Jack, quick! Get out your rifle. Coyotes!" Naab pulled on the reins and pointed to one side. Hare discerned 3 grayish sharp-nosed beasts sneaking off in the sage, and he reached back for the rifle. Naab whistled, stopping the coyotes. Then Hare shot. The ball cut a wisp of dust above and beyond them. They loped away into the sage. "How that rifle spangs!" exclaimed Naab. "It's good to hear it. Jack, you shot high. That's the trouble with men who have never shot at game. They can't hold low enough. Aim low, lower than you want. Ha! There's another this side. Hold ahead of him and low quick. Too high again." It was in this way that August and Hare fell far behind the other wagons. The nearer Naab got to his home the more genial he became. When he was not answering Hare's queries he was giving information of his own accord, telling about the cattle and the range, the mustangs, the Navajos, and the desert. Naab liked to talk. He had said he had not the gift of revelation, but he certainly had the gift of tongues. The sun was in the west when they began to climb a ridge. A short ascent and a long turn to the right brought them under a bold spur of the mountain which shut out the northwest. Camp had been pitched in a grove of trees of a species new to Hare. From under a boulder gushed the sparkling spring, a grateful sight, and sound to desert travelers. In a niche of the rock hung a silver cup. "Jack, no man knows how old this cup is or anything about it. We named the springs after it Silver Cup. The strange thing is that the cup has never been lost nor stolen. But could any desert man or outlaw or Indian take it away after drinking here?" The cup was nicked and battered, bright on the sides, moss green on the bottom. When Hare drank from it he understood. That evening there was rude merriment around the camp fire. Snap Naab buzzed on his Jew's harp and sang. He stirred some of the younger braves to dancing, and they stamped and swung their arms, singing "Hoya heya hoya" as they moved in and out of the firelight. Several of the braves showed great interest in Snap's Jew harp, and repeatedly asked him for it. Finally the Mormon grudgingly lent it to a curious Indian, who in trying to play it went through such awkward motions and made such queer sounds that his companions set upon him and fought for possession of the instrument. Then Snap, becoming solicitous for its welfare, jumped into the fray. They tussled for it amid the clamor of a delighted circle. Snap, passing from jest to earnest, grew so strenuous in his efforts to regain the harp that he tossed the Navajos about like shuttlecocks. He got the harp, and concealing it, sought to break away, but the braves laid hold of him, threw him to the ground, and calmly sat astride him while they went through his pockets. August Naab roared his merriment, and Hare laughed till he cried. The incident was as surprising to him as it was amusing. These serious Mormons and silent Navajos were capable of mirth. Hare would have stayed up as late as any of them, but August, saying to him, "Get to bed, to morrow will be bad," sent him off to his blankets, where he was soon fast asleep. Morning found him well, hungry, eager to know what the day would bring. "Wait," said August, soberly. They rode out of the gray pocket in the ridge and began to climb. Hare had not noticed the rise till they were started, and then, as the horses climbed steadily, he grew impatient at the monotonous ascent. There was nothing to see. Frequently it seemed that they were soon to reach the summit, but still it rose above them. Hare went back to his comfortable place on the sacks. "Now, Jack," said August. Hare gasped. He saw a red world. His eyes seemed bathed in blood. Red, scaly ground, bare of vegetation, sloped down, down, far to a vast, irregular rent in the earth, which zigzagged through the plain beneath. To the right it bent its crooked way under the brow of a black timbered plateau. To the left it straightened its angles to find a V-shaped vent in the wall, now uplifted to a mountain range. Beyond this earth-riven line lay something vast and illimitable, a far-reaching vision of white wastes, of purple plains, of low mesas lost in distance. It was the shimmering, dust-veiled desert. "Here we come to the real thing," explained Naab. "This is Windy Slope. That black line is the Grand Canyon of Arizona. On the other side is the Painted Desert where the Navajos live. Coconina Mountain shows his flat head there to the right, and the wall on our left rises to Vermilion Cliffs. Now look while you can, for presently you'll not be able to see." "Why?" "Wind, sand, dust, gravel, pebbles. Watch out for your eyes." Naab had not ceased speaking when Hare saw that the train of Indians trailing down the slope was enveloped in red clouds. Then the white wagons disappeared. Soon he was struck in the back by a gust which justified Naab's warnings. It swept by. The air grew clear again. Once more he could see. But presently a puff, taking him unawares, filled his eyes with dust difficult to remove. Whereupon he turned his back to the wind. The afternoon grew apace. The sun glistened on the white patches of Coconina Mountain. It set and the wind died. "5 miles of red sand," said Naab. "Here's what kills the horses. Get up." There was no trail. All before was red sand, hollows, slopes, levels, dunes, in which the horses sank above their fetlocks. The wheels plowed deep, and little red streams trailed down from the tires. Naab trudged on foot with the reins in his hands. Hare essayed to walk also, soon tired, and floundered behind till Naab ordered him to ride again. Twilight came with the horses still toiling. "There, thankful I am when we get off that strip. But, Jack, that trailless waste prevents a night raid on my home. Even the Navajos shun it after dark. We'll be home soon. There's my sign. See? Night or day we call it the Blue Star." High in the black cliff a star-shaped, wind-worn hole let the blue sky through. There was cheer in Naab's get up now, and the horses quickened with it. The iron-shod hoofs struck the fire from the rosy road. "Easy, easy. So ho!" cried Naab to his steeds. In the pitchy blackness under the shelving cliff they picked their way cautiously and turned a corner. Light twinkled in Hare's sight. A fresh breeze coming from water dampened his cheek, and a hollow rumble, a long roll as distant thunder, filled his ears. "What's that?" he asked. "That, my lad, is what I always love to hear. It means I'm home. It's the roar of the Colorado as she takes her first plunge into the cañon." Chapter 4